Hey everyone, Joe Jacobi, goldtogreen.tv.com. Today's report brought to you by Southern Hearth and Patio on the web at southernhearth.com. Today we're talking green homes, and joining me are Trey Wheeler, an architect at TWH Architecture, and Ethan Collier from Collier Construction, who gets us started by talking about what is a green home.
When we started building green, the primary motive was to build a better house, not the environment. I mean, now that's a great benefit in building green, but the real motive is to build a house that lasts, that gets better utility bills, that is easier to live in. It requires less maintenance. It has better indoor air quality. It doesn't rot, mold, mildew, those sorts of things. So for us, it's about building a house that lasts. You know, your typical house these days doesn't last 50 years. And I tell people that, and they don't believe me because they think, well, yeah, my house is going to last 60, 70 years, but it doesn't. I mean, if you think about every single component on a house has to be replaced at least once, and sometimes 3 or 4 times over the course of 50 years. For example, your windows are replaced twice, your roof is replaced 3 times in 50 years, your entire electrical system, plumbing system, foundation, siding, flooring, plumbing fixtures, electrical fixtures. I mean, you basically rebuilt the entire house 2 or 3 times in 50 years. And by building a house that doesn't require that, you're building a greener house.
Do you think that doing the green construction right is a matter of finding all new kinds of materials, or are there a lot of the materials that are being used in homes today that people can just be smarter with? I mean, how do you guys see the building material parts of this evolving?
I personally think, and I think Trey would agree with me on this, that a lot of what you see with green building is it's component driven, in that you know, when you build a green house, it's just built like every other house. You're just taking all these green components that advertise green, and you're plugging them in. So you go out and you get green windows that are more energy efficient. You put them into your house. You go out and get appliances that are more energy efficient. You put those in your house. Our approach has been, I mean, we use the term whole systems, because instead of just looking at taking different fixtures and items and just applying them to an existing house, we totally changed the way we build using existing materials and existing methods, and just making slight tweaks to those and getting a totally different result. So for example, our framing, I've referred to it as advanced framing. It's the exact same material that's used every other day. I mean, we're not using different material. We actually have the same subcontractors framing our houses that frame everybody else's house. But we've sat down with them and talked to them about how to do things slightly differently, and we double the R value in the wall. I mean, there's no new materials that we have to use. Metal roofing, like we've used on Trey's house, and even like he's used here, it's one of the oldest roofs that's been around.
Sure. The other thing about the new so-called green materials, there's a whole school of thought. These materials are not time tested.
No, they're not,
for the most part, and there is grave concern in the industry about what we're doing to ourselves when we use those materials. We don't know that the adhesives are going to work. We don't know what might happen as a result of some of these new products. So, using a carpet, for instance, that may not off-gas, that's a good thing, and we would certainly all try to do that. But, you know, to Ethan's point, most of what we do doesn't involve any new material at all. Mm-hmm. It's a different way of putting it together and paying attention to what you're doing.
Well, and some of it, like the 5/8 drywall that we were talking about, where we've gone to 2-foot centers on all our framing, and we've switched to 5/8 drywall. The way that we've done the exterior, by doing continuous drywall application to the exterior and it not stopping at intersecting walls, that's a commercial application for drywall.
Sure.
And that's done every day in commercial buildings, and residential builders have never been able to apply that, and we were able to do it at no additional cost to Trey and no additional cost to me. It actually saved material because you don't have all these cuts, and it saved time. It happened faster. That's an application that's been around forever.
I gotta say, Ethan, that for me, this was my light bulb moment walking around Trey's house today, was when we were talking about the 5/8 drywall. And you have to understand, I am not a technical guy when it comes to the nuts and bolts of a house like you guys are, but it went off. Looking at the construction of Trey's house, it just all seemed to be like this one attached piece of house. That it didn't all feel so separated from the floor. We talked about the crawl space and with no crawl space and the concrete, starting with the concrete pad going up to this roof. It just felt like one piece of house.
It feels like that because every part of it's thought through. I mean, because of the design and then the construction method. That's when I try to describe the way his house works to people. All I can say is it works. I mean, it just makes sense. I mean, you walk through it and you can see that every part of it was thought through, and then you start to understand how it's working, and it's obvious that there's a better way to build. And his house is a perfect example of that.
And a lot of that, I think, is a result of the fact that Ethan and I are willing to collaborate with one another and work together as a team, even to bring his subcontractors, even material suppliers to the table. And learn from each other about the best way to do things.
We had multiple breakfasts just trying to figure out how to insulate the edge of his concrete slab. I mean, a concrete slab detail like he has on his house in a commercial application hasn't really been insulated in the past. So we're taking a process of doing this slab on grade, which is typically used in commercial settings, and we're applying it to a residential setting, but we still need to figure out how to insulate the edges of the slab. And that was a conversation that we had 3-4 hours of talking about this is something that really needs to happen, but we don't know exactly how we're going to do it. Let's draw and figure out. And that collaboration, I think, is amazing because now we've got a house that does have a concrete slab, and the entire exterior of that concrete slab is insulated. And to the best of my knowledge, it hasn't been done that way before, and it works. It's pretty exciting doing stuff like that.
One last thing I'd like for both of you all to weigh in on, something that occurred to me while we were over there. Your father worked in this field. You're 31 years old. I'd love for you guys to talk about just your ideas on the multi-generational aspects of green. I mean, it's very clear. It's becoming very clear to me that people of different generations sort of see this whole movement differently. What are you guys seeing? Well,
professionally, that's an interesting and complex question, perhaps. I think that what happened in the 70s with the little sort of oil crisis that we went through really probably hurt the design and construction industry tremendously, because we saw people at that point in time, 30, 40 years ago, react often strongly to a perceived energy crisis. The crisis suddenly went away. The buildings that were built often didn't work very well. They were often very, very expensive. There's a large example of one in downtown Chattanooga. And so people of that generation are not prone to jump on this bandwagon, if you can call it that, and that's not the fair term. It's slowed us down. They said, hey, we've been through this before. Yeah, we don't want to fool with it.
We meet a lot of resistance from building trade individuals that were around then.
Right.
And they say things like, oh, we did that in the past and it didn't work. Oh, we've tried that, it didn't work. It's just a trend. It's just about making more money.
Just a trend. Hear that all the time.
And it's just not the case. And one of the big differences between then and now is, we use this term building science, and that is that we've actually, since then, we've studied the way houses work, and we've applied natural science, the way moisture moves, the way energy moves, the way water moves. I mean, the way water moves on a wall when the sun hits it. I mean, water normally moves down a wall. When the sun comes up and hits it, it'll actually drive that water into the wall. I mean, this isn't new information. It's just the first time that science has been applied to building. I mean, engineering has been applied to buildings for decades, forever. To actually apply like natural science, physics to a building is relatively new. And that's one of the big differences between then and now. It's why when people say, oh, well, that won't work, it's why we can confidently say, yes, it will. I mean, moisture moves more to less every day. I mean, in the 70s it moved more to less, and today it moves more to less, and 100 years from now it's going to move more to less. So we're not going on like, the information that we have is different than it was during the 70s. And that's one of the things that my generation and Trey's generation has embraced, is that there is this information out here and we don't question it. it's science. I mean, we see it in a plastic bag with bread in it. You leave it out in the sun and it condensates on the bottom of the plastic. I mean, you see it and you know it, and now we're applying that to a house, and it's completely changing the way that houses are working.
There's so much here. We're going to turn this into a second goldtogreen.tv.com segment. We are going to go on site to Trey's home and look at the nuts and bolts and see what green means to them right up close. He is Ethan Collier. You can find him online at collierbuild.com, and the architect is Mr. Trey Wheeler. You can find him online at twharch.com. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Happy to.
Thanks. It's
Thank
been
you.
fun.
Cool. Well, we look forward to going back out on site the next time. We'll be doing that in a couple weeks.